I greet you all. I want to believe that we are fine. I want us to talk about creating a database. I hope that by now all of us installed MySQL or XAMPP, which has both MySQL and PHP. But I also want to believe that by now we all have NetBeans IDE. So first, I'm going to create a simple database so that we can work with that. So let me just access my XAMPP and start the server. If we go to the XAMPP control panel, start Apache and MySQL. Once we have those started, you don't have to close this, so I'm just going to minimize it. And then we shall go to any browser that you have. I'm using Firefox. And what I want here is to access my server through a browser. Since it is on this machine, I'll do a localhost PHP my admin. And once we are there, if you have a password, it will ask you for a password, and then you just put your password and you're there. We're going to create a simple database. Of course, this is my server. It has adopted a certain IP address, 127.0.0.1. I want to create a database. And so I will give my database a name. Maybe I'll call it farm. You possibly have a different name because you're all working on different databases. So we create this database. I'm not creating everything in SQL because I know you have already had a course unit in databases, and so you know how to write the code and how all that comes about. In this database farm, we want to create a table, and I'm just going to create one table called products. And I'll choose how many columns I want. That means attributes. So based on your design, you know how many attributes you want. I'm going to just put 2 of them for now. And so I'll go ahead and give these attributes names. I'll say I have a product number. Possibly I'll make it a variable character, and as long as 5. I'll also have a product name. I'll make it a variable character, and maybe I'll make it 15. And once I am done with that, I can now go on and save. Now notice that I'm not going into the nitty-gritties of putting the primary key and so on. You put that from your database knowledge. My interest today is simply cause the connection, see how we are picking this data, how we are storing it, how we are seeing or viewing it, and so on. So we have our database farm. We have our table here under the database called products. When we expand that, we should see the columns which are under our database, pin number and pin name. They are both variable characters. In case we want to add another column, we shall just click on new and add another column. So ideally, when I click on products and I try to browse it, I realize there's no data currently. So we have our database, we have our table in MySQL. Let's go to our IDE NetBeans and create our project. So we are creating a web project or application. I'm going to call this farm application or farm system. And so I'll go to next. I'll use Tomcat Apache, and I'll leave this as is for now, and I'll have that complete the creation of this system. Now I have my project created. When you look through the contents of that project, we have web pages, source packages, libraries, and so on. Our interest mostly will be on the pages and the libraries. So I want you to be keen on that. We have an HTML file, which we really don't need. So I'm going to get rid of it. First of all, I'll close it here, and then I'll delete it because we don't want an HTML file here for now. So we shall create our JSP file, and I'm going to call that file products. Maybe to start with the first page, which we'll need, I'll call it an index file so that it's the first file that runs whenever I run my application. So I'm calling it index.jsp. By default, when we run the application, that index file runs. So that's why I'm calling mine index.jsp. When I run this, of course, my application will open and run through any active or any default browser. Now, if I have that done, my interest is not to see hello world, because that's really not my interest. My interest is to see a form which will enable me enter this data in my database. So to start with, I can decide to call this form product details, or I can even call it farm products. And then I could put a heading here for one to start entering. I could say enter products. Now, if I want to enter those products, then I need a form. And so I will have to create a form here, which will enable me to enter these products. Of course, you want to show where that form ends somewhere. We are going to have our inputs. Remember that we want to put some products in our table. We created our table. It has P number and name. So possibly those are the two values or values that I want, or variables. So I want a product number. I also want a product name, so that when I enter them, they'll come and feed this table. So I need a control to help me pick this data. So I'm going to create an input control of type text type. So that means I'm going to create a text box. Whatever will be in that text box will go to a variable that I'll call pin number. So I could even say in full here, this is the product number. Just product number like that. Because this is just a label on the form. But I may want some space after this has been created. So I'll cause a line break so that these buttons are not, or these controls are not so clogged together. So I also have now my name. It's also going to be a text box, and I'm going to say possibly it is just name. I could say this is my product name. Product name. So that will be my label on the form. I may also need a button that will cause the action to happen to cause the storage. So I'm going to cause a button here. The type of the control is submit. Okay. And then what will be seen on that button, or what will be the words. So I cause a value and I say insert the product or insert record, whatever it is that you think you want to put. So now if we run our form, we possibly should be seeing that now we have a certain entry form that has been created, which we can use to make entry. But now, even if we put information, it's not going anywhere really, because we have not set it to any place. For starters, let us pick this data and show it on another page before we can see how to put it in the database. So I'm going to create another page because there might be a situation where you're picking data from one form onto another form. So I could say, I want to call this what? Maybe let's just call it insert data.jsp. So we are creating another file called insert data. I want to call this confirmation page. That's just a page title. I could say this is data inserted. If that is my heading, what do I actually want to see? I want to see what has been entered the other side. So I want to cause a display. So if I want to cause a display, I'm going to pick those values using my given tags. What is it that I am picking? Start with, possibly I want to pick, we are going to use the request object. What are we requesting? We are requesting using the method getParameter, so that we get whatever parameter is in our given, whatever parameter is there in our text box. But we have two parameters, P and O and name, because those are the variable names. So to start with, I'll pick that. And then I'll also pick the second. Which was name. So if I also pick the name, that's what I have. Now I also possibly want to say that when I run this, it is this page that I should see with this content. So that means I want to go here and cause insert page what happens when this form runs. So I'll go into action and say my action is actually to run insert data.jsp page. But how? Okay, I also need a method of how this is happening. So I could use the post method. One could be interested in using the get method. Okay, so if that is my case, let us try to run this and now see what is going to happen. And see what is going to happen. I'm just trying to get power because I see my battery is warning. So if this is my form running, I'm interested in seeing this data transferred to the page that I've created called insert data. So if I put search records, I should see that data going to the page. But now if it goes to this page, possibly it's not communicating. Now I don't know what these are. So I could see that maybe on this page, I had something like the product number, what was entered for product number. I could say that's what was entered for product number, and maybe that's what was entered for the product name. Now realize that here I'm just using an expression here so that I don't use the output method, but one can decide to use the output method. So again, now when I run and I put my data, I say I have product 10, this is beef. If I insert, I should see that that is what I have there. It's appearing on the same line because I have not chosen to break this. So one could decide to cause a line break so that these are not clogged together. So if we get that running again, we have just transferred or entered data on one JSP page, and we are seeing it on another JSP page. So this is the data that was inserted. We are just looking at a confirmation page. Our interest actually was to see that this data goes into this form so that we are not seeing an empty table, but it has data which has come from this form. So now, instead of seeing the data coming to show on this page, we want to use this page to send this data to our table. So what are we going to do now? We are going to create our JSP tags here and create a situation which allows us to put this data. To start with, we are going to create our own variables here that will store the data that is coming from our form. Because these are all in text boxes, I'm going to cause them to be strings. So I'm going to have a product number, and I'm also going to have a name. And where are these coming from? So where am I getting this? I'm actually just using this to pick these values. So we have, we are getting the parameter, which is in P&O. Which one is P&O? P&O is this, the variable name we gave to the first text box. We are also getting our variable or the value, which is in name. Which one is name? Name is the variable name we gave to the second text box. Of course, we want to terminate these because these are Java statements now. Now I'm getting rid of this. So we have our variables. We have stored or picked the values from our form here now. As someone enters them here, we are sending them using the post method after clicking the submit button, and they are stored in these variables here. Once that is done, now our next thing is to take these values to the database table. So we are going to create a class for our connection driver, because we shall need drivers to connect our database, and we shall put the driver name there. We are also going to create a connection class. I'm going to call mine con, but you can call it anything. And I'm going to use the driver manager. The tool called driver manager is really a class, and it uses, we are going to use the get connection method. We are going to use the get connection method. In this get connection method, we are interested in the actual URL where the database is. We are interested in the username to the database and the password to the database, because we are now trying to connect. Here, we shall specify what drivers to use to get our connection. Here, we are creating the actual connection, and we are saying this connection, we are getting a particular connection to where we shall put the name of where we want to connect. That is the database name. And we are getting into that database how we shall put the username there. We are getting into that database with what password we shall put the password there. So that means here we want the database name, location. Here we want the username into that database. Here we want the password to that database. But that's not all. We remember when we get into this database, we want to run an SQL statement, which is going to enter data into that database table. So we are going to create another class statement. I'm going to call it ST. You can call it anything because this is just an object. So I'm creating an object for this statement. It's going to make use of this object for the connection. So I have con there. What is it going to do? It's going to create for me a statement. Now this is objects and classes in Java. So if it's creating for me a statement, what is this statement going to do? It's going to update my database. So we use the execute update method to help us do the change or make the change on our database. Whatever statement we want to work with will be inside here. Why are we still getting this problem? We need to specify the connection that we are talking about. Now, to start with, we want to have the drivers. We want to have these drivers included in our library of this particular application. Now, you realize that you will need the libraries. I have just downloaded them and stored them on my desktop. So when you go to my desktop under, what did I call that? Under MySQL drivers, you'll find jar that, and I'll be interested in using MySQL connector, Java that. I have already shared this in our shared folder, so you'll be able to get it there. So that's where I'll go to pick it. So we are back here. We want to add that library. So I'll just go here. I want to add a jar library, or better still, one would say, go to properties. And when you go to properties, you say add the jar library. So if you say you add the jar library, you want to look for where yours is. So you go to your folder, pick it and put it somewhere on your computer. When we go inside that folder, we choose my SQL connector. If you don't want to use what I have shared, you can download yours. So once I have this open, notice that it is included there, and I'll just say okay. Now, of course, now you should be seeing it there. If we don't have that driver, then we will not be able to connect to MySQL. So you need the drivers to help you connect to connect your IDE, which is NetBeans, to your MySQL. Even if we were connecting to Access, we will need the drivers. Even if we were connecting to Oracle, we would need the drivers. So we have our drivers, fine, but we need to create the connection. So you go to Services. Under Services, you go to your database. When you expand your database, you should be seeing that there is MySQL server at localhost somewhere. We want to create a connection. So we right-click on database and create a new connection. What kind of connection are we creating? So we choose the driver MySQL because we are not connecting to Oracle. So use MySQL connector. That's what we are connecting. And then add, if it's not listed here, you want to go and add it. All right. If it's not listed, you want to go and add it. If I want to remove, I'll go and remove those. All right. If I'm adding, I want to go and look for where I stored it and have it added. And when you go to next, now you specify your actual database. Which database exactly do I want stored to? Remember, we created our database and called it farm. So that is the name of the database that I'm going to specify here. And I'm going to say, I want to connect to the farm database in this new connection that I'm creating. The port will be picked automatically. The host name is localhost since we didn't change it and we are not connecting to an offsite host or database host. If we had our server connecting to a server somewhere, we would put the server name here. I'm going to leave the password empty so that I don't have to struggle with passwords. I need to test this connection and see whether I have the connection. If yes, we'll have connection succeeded. If no, there will be an error message. Most cases, the error comes in when we have not added the driver in our library folder. Also, you want to add the drivers in your library before you create the connection. Once that is done, we shall just finish that. And so once you finish, you should have a link created for you to that particular database, which you have called farm. And so when I expand farm, I should see a database farm and I should see my table there called products. When I expand it, I should see the actual columns that I am able to see in MySQL. Now, if we execute this and try to run it, we want to see what is there. We can right-click on products and try to view the data. When we do that, you realize that there is no data. You see the columns are empty. So what do we want to do? We want to add data to these tables. So we go back to our insert data form. And when we do that, now notice that automatically when we added the driver, SQL driver manager was added. So we want to add, we want to import a library file which supports SQL because we can see that where the errors are coming from. It's not recognizing connection, it's not recognizing statement. So we need to add a directive. Remember we said to create a directive, we need the tags, the scriptlet tags, and then we need an @ symbol. Now here we are trying to create a directive. And now we are saying, what is it that we want to import? So I have the import keyword there. Whatever I am importing, I'm going to put it in quotes. And so I'll say what I want to import is the SQL libraries, all of them. All right. Once we have that, notice that our error is now gone. We don't have the error anymore. But now we want to specify what database it is, because here we set a database location. Which one is that location? And what drivers are we using? So what you will do, you will right click on this connection that you have created on the path of that connection. Notice that after localhost 330, there is farm, because that is the connection. So we go to properties of that connection and we look for the driver class. When we click on that expansion tool, you can see the name of the class that we are using for that driver. So I'll just copy that because that is what I need. I'll go to the class name there and I'll paste it. Now I need the location of my database. Again, I'll right click on this connection, go to properties, look for display name, expand it. Our interest, the name of the location is right from JDBC to where the database name is. We don't need the rest of the things. So I'm just highlighting from the start of this string to where farm is, because farm is my database. So that's the path of my database. I have just copied that. So I'll say that's my database location. So I'm going to put it in the position of the database location. What is the username? Remember that we chose our username to actually be root. So you can see the username is root, but there is no password. Okay, so our username here is root. Since there is no password, we are going to just remove this and leave it empty so that we are not really struggling with password. So again, after that, what is the statement we want to run? We want to insert data. So now we are going to write our insert statement. We are now employing our database here, which we did. I'm sure you did that. So we are inserting, where are we inserting? Into a certain table. What table? It's called products. So we are inserting into products. We can choose to specify the attributes. And then we want to say we are inserting certain values. So what are the attributes we are inserting into? We are inserting into P&O and the name. What are the values? Because both are variable characters, they will take the quotes. But again, we are picking strings. So whatever value we are picking will be enclosed in double quotes because of strings. Now again, the statement requires us to use a plus sign on both sides to tag, to merge the strings so that they are inserted as a row. So we want all the column values to be inserted at once as a row in our database table. That's why the plus signs are there. So in between here, we are going to put the actual values that we are inserting. But remember, we picked these values from the page which had the form. Okay, so this is the form. When someone enters the value here, it goes to this variable. This page has picked that value. We have got that parameter value and we have stored it in this variable. So the product number is in PN. So that is what we are going to store there. The product name is in NM. So that is what we are putting there. And so our statement seems to be ready. Let us try to run our statement and see whether we don't have any problem. So now we expect a browser to pop up so that it allows us to make entry. And so I could say the product name is 01. Product itself is milk. When I say insert record, what happens? Data has been inserted. So if this data is inserted, am I sure it is inserted? We want to go to our farm here and refresh. I'm just going to right click and refresh. When I do, right click on product, view the data. We can see that our record is there. If it is there and I'm accessing my database from MySQL, the back end, is the data there? Let me just refresh. We should be able to see that the data is actually entered. So we can see the first product is there. But now again, if one is making these entries, we don't want them to be closing the web page every time they make that entry. So maybe you want to cause that every time they make the first entry, if they want to enter again, they have a link which takes them back to the entry form so that you don't have to keep running the project again. So that means now, once the data has been entered, which is ending there, I can decide now to cause an anchor tag, an anchor tag, so that I have caused a link to another page. And so what page is that I want to connect to? This one, it's the one which had the form. So I have my index form dot JSP. Now this is really HTML. What do I want to be seen on the page? Insert next record. Insert next record. So if someone clicks on that, they should be able to insert another. Let's see how that plays out. Okay. So if I have that, then I can go on and say, now this is the second record. I could say we have beef as my second record. When I insert that I inserted, I want to insert the next record. I go on and say 3 skin. Okay. I insert that. If I want to insert the next record, that is maybe 04, and maybe it's dung. If I insert that, if you want to insert the next record, you can go on. If that's done, you're through. We want to refresh this so that we can see whether our data is actually existing in our table. So when we view the data, we should be able to see this data existing. So if we view our data is there in our table. If we are viewing it from the back end, we should be still comfortable and we should be seeing our data in the back end. Okay, so we have successfully created our application and linked our form to the database. We have been able to insert data through our form into the database, and we have been able to go to our database and view this form. We have also been able to cause a loop of entry where one keeps going back to the entry page so that they are able to enter this data. So let us do that and cause that to also happen on our various systems. Remember, you will need to have your drivers added to your project library. So that means when you go to projects, you must be seeing this library or the drivers. And I have said, pick the folder. Pick this folder. You'll find this folder in the shared folder. Pick it and place it anywhere, maybe on your desktop or where you put your softwares, so that when time comes to add it, you'll be able to open it and pick this first item. You leave the second one alone. You can even delete it so that it doesn't confuse you. So when we come to add, just right click, add jar folder, or better still, go to properties, and then when you go there, click on add jar folder. Then it will cause you to look for that folder where you saved it. If it's on your desktop, go to your desktop, get it, open it, and then select this first one and just choose open. Once you do that, click OK, and then you'll be seeing this driver there. If it's not there, you'll not be able to connect the two tools. And then again, after you have done that, you need to create the database connection. And we have said to do that, right click, go to new connection, choose add. Okay, before you choose add, select here that you are making a MySQL connection. So when you choose MySQL connection, if this is not showing here, go to add. But if you've added the library, it will already show there. Choose that, and then you go to the next step where you specify the database name. How you know that database name? You have already created it this side. So if the database is farm, if the database is library, if the database is hotel, that is the database name that you pick because it's the one you want to connect to. So you put it right here, and also be mindful of the rest, test your connection, and you finish. If the test result is false, even if you write your code fine this side, it will not connect. And then, of course, the next thing you want to do once you have done that, in your receiving script, you want to create classes to help you with that, but you also want to import the SQL libraries. So that is it. Please include that in your projects and let us see that happen.